So I want to build off what we were just talking about in the last video, and I also want to build off thinking about our discussion from Tuesday, again, in class or in these video lectures, about kind of the branches of philosophy. Okay, so how does kind of like our setup on Tuesday influence kind of what we're talking about today, or what we can engage with today, right? And a couple of things to say, okay? And thinking about like pictures in motion, right? Which again, I think is a really interesting way of like thinking about both the reference to the importance and historical kind of profoundness of film, and thinking about it in terms of kind of where we're at now in 2020, of these, again, kind of pictures in motion. So in thinking about these pictures in motion, film kind of presents us with a very interesting set of questions and commentary, right? And I kind of touched on this like in the syllabus day, but kind of want to dive a little bit deeper into it today. But I mean, in some capacity, and even like, the most sci-fi of films, the most like out there of films, right? They still have roots and they still have themes that are somehow based in like the reality with which we know, right? And so this is like this interesting concept here, especially in sci-fi films, which I require, there's going to be one in a couple of weeks. Sci-fi, yet also like philosophy of language, and we'll say more when we get there. But even like those most like far out kind of like sci-fi or really heady, really trippy films, they still in some capacity to have any sort of resonance, to have any sort of resonance, to have any sort of connection to the viewer, they have to be related to themes that we are familiar with in this reality, right? And so films, I think, have this really interesting component where film, right, themes in film reference reality in some way. However, like these films aren't real, okay? So there's, again, this line that's being walked. The films challenge our possibility with reality, right? The line that various films walk is something that can be incredibly thin, and sometimes can be so jarring at that because the line is so thin, right? That, I mean, you can think about, again, a variety of films, and I'm sure that all of us have like, perhaps like an example where, even, the film, I forgot. Anyway, we can all think of a variety of films that play on these themes that seem kind of universal, perhaps, or these themes that seem connective, that we all have resonance with, even when the film is so outlandish, right? So even when something seems so, again, kind of like, seems so beyond our ability to grasp it, or beyond our ability to really think of like, oh my gosh, that's just crazy. Well, there's still going to be themes that connect with things that we are familiar with and themes that we know about, okay? And so this goes into, again, kind of trying to connect with our discussions from Tuesday about the branches of philosophy as it relates to thinking about, okay, metaphysics, right, as this branch of philosophy, looking at the ultimate nature of reality. There are enough films that we can all kind of, again, think of that challenge our ultimate conception of reality. There are enough films that will challenge kind of our ability to go beyond what is possible, right? Go beyond kind of the mere reality with which we all exist in already, right? And so in thinking about like metaphysical components of film, and thinking about metaphysical challenges in film, we can definitely see where and how this represents, right? In the metaphysical sense. the next branch of epistemology, thinking about theories of knowledge, thinking about how we know what we know and do we know anything at all. Right? Like, this is really interesting when it comes to film. And there's overlap with the focus on metaphysics as well. But thinking about epistemology and theories of knowledge, thinking about theories of knowledge as it relates and differs between belief, knowledge, understanding, and certainty. Again, this kind of spectrum of all these things. And in that, right, what do films or how do films contribute to what we think we know? Right? What do films or how do films contribute to what we think we know? And you can, again, a handful of examples. You can think about like certain biopic movies, right? Meaning like a biopic, right? A movie about a famous person or some person in history, right? And that contributes to a knowledge, that contributes to kind of an understanding of that person. Or you can think about an instance, like, and I think a good example is the movie Apollo 13, right? That, for, you know, it was back in the mid-90s that it was produced. Tom Hanks is in it. But essentially, right, this you know, pick about this movie rather about a pretty intense experience in the space program in the 60s. Okay, so again, like epistemologically speaking, what do films or how do films contribute to what we think we know? How do films reinforce our beliefs? How do films challenge our beliefs? Right? And, you know, kind of like walking in a separate kind of aisle here, I think are like the genre of documentaries, right? Where maybe it's more explicit in the epistemological sense. But still, there seems to be this realm within which we exist that requires, again, kind of like effort, requires discernment, requires thoughtfulness as it relates to perhaps new knowledge acquisition. Okay? So again, like epistemologically speaking, what and how do films relate? Epistemologically speaking, how do films connect to what we think we know, okay? And what we can know? And you can see that there is, again, overlap perhaps there with metaphysics. And then when we think about logic, when we think about like rational argumentation, you know, and we see various films that want to like, you know, kind of like operate, you know, with an overall conclusion or have a set of premises about why you ought to adopt a certain belief about the world or a certain, why you ought to adopt a certain kind of, you know, position in the world. Well, why, right? And you can kind of think about movies in that very like analytical sense, or maybe in a bit of a different way. Like, does the plot line seem consistent, right? Does the movie from start to finish kind of connect? And I mean, obviously there are movies that don't have that. There are movies that purposefully have that kind of like disjointed aspect to them. But in what way might or could films, again, kind of like stay really consistent throughout the whole process or fall apart? And again, maybe there's a flimsiness there in the storyline. Okay? Maybe there's a way of kind of connecting that. And then lastly here, thinking about axiology, thinking about like these theories of value. Well, how do, again, movies reinforce or shape our own values? Or how do films, how do movies challenge our values, right? And when we leave a movie like maybe feeling really frustrated, really upset, really challenged, really kind of anxious, like maybe we like have physiological responses, like we're a little more sweaty, we're a little more flush, right? All because like the film that we watched was so powerful, right? Well, probably in some way it challenged our values, right? Or challenged, again, there's an intersectionality here, challenged our values, challenged our metaphysical kind of beliefs about the world. And so again, we have to take that for the importance that it is, that movies can challenge us, right? And particularly, and I mean this is a little bit of a segue, but one of the movies that you're tasked with watching next week is Parasite, which is the most recent winner of Best Picture. And again, there's a whole lot of movies that could be kind of shown out of the gates, but as it relates to values and as it relates to, again, kind of like some of these themes, I think that Parasite hits a lot of these themes in really unique and powerful and potentially troubling ways. So as you're kind of watching, Parasite next week, thinking about the nature of like value as it relates to money, as it relates to affluence, value as it relates to desired goods, to a quality of life, value as it relates to human relationships. Okay, so there's a lot to be said here about the nature of value. Okay, and I mean all of our films in some capacity or another reference various values. Okay? Because that's just the nature of the way that we move through the world. Is we move through the world by valuing, by making those evaluations. Okay? But we can see very clearly that like the 4 branches of philosophy that we talked about on Tuesday have direct connection with kind of our overall topic for the course, which is looking at these philosophical themes in film. Okay? So I hope this gives you enough to think about, to consider, to be challenged by. And again, I encourage you to kind of like have conversations with friends about like why are we drawn to films? What can we learn from films? And then how do films influence us? Both probably for the positive and for the negative, right? So hopefully that gives you enough to kind of start off with. And then next week, we are out of the classroom. And you'll see the various kind of links in BB Learn for the various films to watch. On Tuesday, I have linked up a variety of short films. Because again, there's something really interesting where short films aren't TV shows, right? But yet they can kind of pack a powerful message. And so in looking at that and seeing some of the themes of those short films, to again kind of like orient ourselves for the course. And then next Thursday you will see, pardon me, I should make sure I have the syllabus up correctly here. Let me find it. And then next Thursday, like I said, the viewing of Parasite is your assignment. You will also see that next Thursday you have a discussion board post on September 10th, and I'll say more about that either in a video lecture or kind of when we get there next Thursday. So until next time, cheers, and I hope you all stay safe. Good luck out there.